People that work in the wedding industry, have you ever seen a couple and immediately thought this ends in divorce? Why? By Ask Reddit.
Photographing the groom and you see his eyes light up when a guest arrives. You look over and it's a cute woman in a short dress. He smiles, walks up to the woman, picks her up and swings her in his arms. Best smile I captured of the groom all day. Marriage didn't last 6 months from what I've heard.
WOA, that's really sad.
I agree. They hired 1 primary and 2 secondary photographers to capture the event. Huge wedding party, I think it was like 20 people. They had over 100 people attend a huge church wedding. I couldn't hardly get emotion from the bride or groom. It was like there was something going on the entire time. The bride seemed really nervous. Groom just didn't show emotion. I did the best I could given what they would give me. Then that happened. Before the wedding, as the guests were arriving, and right in front of the church and everyone. She could have been a lover, a best friend, or a family member. Who knows? It was just really weird to finally see his reaction, and nothing like that for his bride.
I went to a wedding where these two appeared madly in love. I've known them since college. They were always acting like kids in love. The passion and emotion just oozed from them. A week after the wedding, one of my other friends said he had sex with the bride in their hotel room the day of the wedding, while the groom party was golfing. He had just met her a couple of days earlier. Right after the honeymoon, they went back to having an affair. She got pregnant. Marriage was over within months, maybe 5 or 6 months. The most odd sequence of events. You just never know what's really going on in relationships.
Butthole move by the bride and the friend.
That sounds like one we went to. The groom was walking around holding hands with a woman who wasn't his wife. A year or so later he left his wife for her.
At a wedding, when the I do's came, the groom said, "I guess."
This may be the biggest oof on this entire comment section.
I have a friend who is a wedding photographer, a rather busy and expensive one at that, so people usually book a year in advance. So she had a bride book the wedding date and pay the deposit, nothing unusual there. The bride confirmed the venue, also booked and pricey, and had the general discussions with her about the style that she wanted, etc. They had regular meetings over the following months, but the groom was never there, a bit unusual, but not unheard of. So it's now 4 weeks before the wedding and they have the meeting to lock down all the details, but still no groom. My friend asks about him, and the bride mentions for the first time that she isn't engaged. Okay, maybe she has a long-term boyfriend and is planning a surprise wedding. No, it turns out that she doesn't have a boyfriend or any guy in mind. But she prayed about it and God told her to trust that he will provide a groom for her. So, in the end, no groom magically materialized, and there was no wedding. So in that case, the marriage lasted 0 minutes and we were all sure that it wasn't going to work out. In fact, at the time we had some running jokes about her meeting a guy on a date and asking him if he wants to go to a wedding with her next weekend.
Okay, this made me say wow out loud, in such a way that all 3 cats were startled. Wow. I have so many thoughts and feelings. Wow.
Smells like a manic episode.
Was it a friend's wedding once? It was at the Justice of the Peace, when the judge or officiant came around to if anyone doesn't believe in the union to speak up or forever hold your peace. A loud, "uh-oh," came shrieking from the back. It was my friend's 2-year-old son. Everybody was joking, saying it was a sign. Less than a year later the couple got divorced.
He has the sight. This was its first manifestation.
When the bride and groom argued over why the groom's mother shouldn't get all money given to them on their wedding day. Yeah, that was a red flag.
Ha ha ha, my ex tried to convince me to let his mum take the money that night and we'd collect it the next afternoon when we got back from our hotel stay. Fat chance I'd let the extreme gamblers hold on to that much cash.
My now ex's parents were determined to hold all the catering leftovers for us, and everyone who wasn't me, the groom, or the groom's siblings thought I was effing out of my mind when I put my foot down and said absolutely not. I will personally put those leftovers in my own car and drive them to my own parents' house if need be. F off, no chance. Ex's parents have a large, very pretty yard and occasionally host small events there, like local graduation party type stuff, nothing massive. But it makes them a little side cash. They're also greedy and miserable scamming assholes. They had a complete meltdown and finally admitted that they'd sold tickets to a catered meal at their place that very night, and our wedding leftovers were the entire meal down to the cake and everything. They contributed $0 to the wedding or catering, not that it matters, but they had no leg in the world to assume that food was theirs. They sold our effing leftover wedding cake weeks ahead of time. They had to rush home and order pizza for their, fancy catered dinner.
This is one of the funniest things I've ever heard. Not funny for you of course, but I just can't imagine what kind of lunatic would sell tickets to eat wedding leftovers they just assumed they could get their hands on. I hope they lost money on the deal XD.
This just blew my mind. You should post this in our entitled people. Mental. People are mental.
You should have seen my face when I discovered the narcissist parents sub. It is them to AFing T once they admitted what was up. I knew exactly what bullpoo they would have pulled once we discovered our leftovers were gone. Some crap about why don't you love us? Family helps each other out. Why do you want us to be sad and poor? We were honoring your wedding by sharing it even further, blah blah.
We were honoring your wedding by sharing it even further, my god.
Say what? The nerve.
One of my close friends asked everyone to give cash or gift cards instead of presents, because they already had a house with everything they needed. At the reception, her dad stands up for his speech and offers the gifted money to the Buddhist temple where their family went. My friend was mortified, her husband got super angry, but it was done. There must have been 200 plus people at that wedding. That temple got a huge donation.
But why did they let that happen? I mean, yeah, the dad said that, but why did they just give him the money to donate?
Ever heard the expression, there are two sure ways of losing a friend, one is lending money, and the other is borrowing money? If there's one thing I've learned is that people get very uptight over money issues, and it's important to make everything clear and transparent so that everyone can agree on it, especially when it comes to a marriage, or it can go sideways fast. The father of the bride make a DK move. I can totally sympathize with the husband.
It was the third time the bride had hired me and all the guys had been carbon copies.
She clearly had a type. The type wasn't working, but she wasn't going to let that stop her.
She wasn't a quitter.
Well, except for the previous marriages.
Throw enough darts at the wall and eventually one will stick.
Did you have to write the second and third guy's names on your hand? I had a client like this once. He had a very particular type. No clue how he managed to find 3+ of the same woman. Regardless, after I called number 2's name on accident, I had to start writing her name down on my hand to avoid that happening anymore. Real estate consultant.
My sister introduced someone to my uncle and his new wife. She meant it like newly, recently wedded, but he understood it as new as opposed to his old wives, the next one, and he stormed out of the event.
Seems me be one common factor in all these failed marriages. You.
Do you have any friends her type? Sounds like a real moneymaker. Can't walk away from repeat business like that.
They had a big fight the night before the wedding and were considering calling it off. Until the bride showed up 30 minutes before the ceremony, no one was sure if she would be there at all. The groom danced with his mom more times than he did with the bride. The bride was snippy and nitpicky with the staff all night. The word, annulment, was cast around and I hope to God they went through with it the next day because holy poo.
Did they sign the papers at the ceremony? Usually those don't get filed until at least the next day.
A few times as a photographer. The couple were usually fine, the families themselves were too different and combative.
This is why my husband and I eloped. We keep our families as separate as possible. His side isn't bad and my paternal aunts and uncles are cool, so they would probably be fine. But, having my immediate family interact with his immediate family just makes me cringe. Think hardcore Republican versus suburban Democrats.
This is why my husband and I eloped. We keep our families as separate as possible. Can you please talk to my wife? We're both from abusive, dysfunctional families. In the beginning, we bonded over our commitment to escaping our families and their toxicity. I go to great lengths to keep my family out of our lives. She clings for dear life to her pooty, abusive family. This literally isn't what I signed up for. Why would I want to spend time with people who have emotionally abused and bullied my wife and crippled her self-esteem? I hate these people.
Have y'all tried couples therapy? Or at least suggested you both go to individual therapy? It can be very good for recognizing unhealthy patterns.
I second this. Personal therapy really helped me figure out how to make boundaries in my life.
The premarital counseling we did also helped us figure out how we wanted to interact with each other's families. I empathize with both of you guys cause it's hard to see someone you love bashing their head into the same wall. But also it's really hard to let go of familial relationships. Especially if there are events or weekly calls or something that are habitual. I knew I wanted to go no contact with my mom, but it took me 3 years to actually get to that point. It was baby steps. First explaining what I expected of her when we were talking and ending conversations whenever she ignored those expectations. Then I started blocking her number for longer and longer periods of time when she effed up. The breaking point of not talking to her at all was when my sister complained to me about her behavior. My mom was listening to my boundaries, but obviously she was still the same ugly person just waiting to lull me into a false sense of security. Even after that, whenever I'm walking around a store or down the block, I get the urge to call her, cause that's when we talk. It's hard, and I hope you guys can work as a team to build boundaries around your life together.
Oh my god, yes. And my fiancé would be married by now if the idea of our families actually meeting wasn't absolutely horrifying.
I don't work in the wedding industry, but I have a depressing wedding story. I have a friend who I grew up with. She was always gorgeous and incredibly popular with guys, and I always thought she was a great person. As I got older, I came to realize she was actually extremely toxic in relationships and did better when she was single. She had been seeing a new guy for 2 months when one day I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Knowing her history, it was a massive red flag for me. I turn up to the wedding and it's at a gorgeous little backyard type wedding. It's spring and everything looks perfect. I greet her family and it's like I've turned up to a funeral, not a wedding. They're all extremely solemn, and when I ask about the groom, her mother rolls her eyes and says this is a mistake. Wedding commences, and as the bride comes down the aisle, her face is grey and like she would rather be anywhere else. They exchange vows while the bride does everything in her power to not touch her husband, to be even standing a solid meter away from him as they stand at the front. She actually cringes and looks away when he gets choked up saying how much he loves her. When the priest announces the kiss, the bride takes a slow step forward and presents her cheek for him to kiss instead of her lips. No one cheers, it's just an awkward shuffling of feet and a few scattered claps. It was the worst wedding I've ever been to. They lasted about 3 months, before separating.
Wow, why did she even do it?
Convenience really, and fear of being alone? She was a little older and had always thought she would be married and have the whole white picket fence lifestyle before she was 25, but ended up getting married closer to 40?
I work in a hotel. I came in one night to find the wedding was already wrapped up. It was supposed to go until 1 AM and it was 11 PM, because the wedding couple had a fight and she went home with mum. At another one they had a huge rehearsal dinner fight which spilled out into the lobby. Everyone in the lobby found out that she hated his parents, she was pregnant and she had no idea who the father was, and a few other things. Half the guest list packed up and checked out the next day. They still got married.
Wow. Scared of the other few things. What's left? You listed the top 3 worst things to hear at a wedding.
I think maybe she insulted his job. I no longer remember what I was told. It was very clear that he loved her and she maybe did, but she was also a toxic person.
Cheating with a best man was probably another. That's one of the only things that can match up with these 3.
Groom's father.
What? They still got married? That's crazy.
Not actually in the industry, but I have helped out a friend with a few weddings. 2 of the weddings I could just tell they weren't going to make it. The first wedding, the bride and groom hardly talked the entire wedding. It was like they had nothing in common. And then later the groom pretty much f's off halfway through and went home because, I quote, he was tired. So he just left his bride having to take pictures with the wedding guests on her own. He never came back that evening, so she had to greet everyone off, etc. Funny enough, about a year later I heard they're filing for divorce. Another time was actually last summer. Just before the wedding speeches, the groom went go hang out with his friends for like half an hour, leaving the bride sitting there alone and delaying the speeches. Then right after the bride and groom cut the cake, he once again went to go hang out with his friends and abandoned his wife. So she was left alone having to mingle with all the guests, and he made no interaction with her side of the guests. He stuck with his friends the rest of the evening. His wife basically had to go and beg him to come and take more wedding pictures. At one point in the evening he actually went for a drive with his friends for about an hour and his wife had no idea where he was. I mean, I get wanting to mingle with your friends at your wedding, but to not even mingle with your wife's family or friends on your wedding day seems quite rude.
Sounds like him and his buds were off getting baked. And rebaked.
A drive for an hour? They were getting high.
Wedding DJ here. Had a wedding a few years ago where the groom was a total DK head. When it was his turn to make a speech, he refused to make one. When the bride's sister begged him to please make a speech or at least just tell the bride she looks beautiful, he got up, took the mic, mumbled to her that she looks beautiful and sat back down. When I left after the wedding was done, I was walking to my van with some gear and I saw the bride sitting one side crying. Found out a few days later that the groom hit her 3 days before the wedding, and he tried to hit her at the wedding again when she asked him to not drink so much and pace himself.
Damn, that's horrible. What a POS.
Major POS. Dude was a DK to all the service providers that day. I bumped into the bride a year or two after the wedding and she told me that they got divorced 4 months after the wedding.
Good on her.
Brew he the whole poo, not just a piece.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.